Now he told a parable to those who were invited, when he noticed how they chose the places of honor, saying to them, "When you are invited by someone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in a place of honor, lest someone more distinguished than you be invited by him. And he who invited you both will come and say to you, 'Give your place to this person,' and then you will begin with shame to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit at the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, 'Friend, move up higher.' Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted."
Good morning. Good morning. How's everyone doing? Yes. All right. Okay. So this is our second service, so we're very excited to have our two services once again. This is kind of goes way back to pre-pandemic. It's been so many years, and so we're excited that we're able to just resume or even just grow in the things of God when God gives us a ministry and just the work that He has allowed us to have. Today is the continuation of our series, Parables for Daily Living. And we start with Jesus giving a parable at a party. How many of us like going to parties? Everyone's hand should go up because I see majority are Filipinos, and Filipinos pretty much invented parties. So this is a party where Jesus was invited. It was a guest. If you, it's just in verse 1, it begins by saying Jesus was a guest in the house of a ruler of a Pharisee. So he was there, and he noticed all these things that were happening. That people were, as you saw the video, that people were picking seats of honor and shame. And we might be wondering, what is that? Does that even relate to us? But just so we can have an idea of what that was in the days of Jesus, we have to first understand the culture and the context of honor and shame. So how did that work? How did that really play out? So William Barclay says it this way, explains it this way. He says, at a feast in Palestine, the table was like a low, solid block, and around it were low couches on which the guests reclined the table. The table was arranged in the form of a U, like a square, with one side unoccupied. In the center of the top side sat the host. The first place of honor was at the right hand, the second place at his left-hand side, the third was the second on the right, the fourth, the second on the left, and so on around the table. Those who were eager and grateful for the invitation usually came early, while those who had a good conceit of their own importance usually came late so that all could see their arrival. So there's this it was a play, a game of pride and ego and honor in their own ways, where they would want to come. If they just knew that they weren't as important, they would come early so they can have that seat. And if they knew that they were important, they'll come late so that host will pretty much embarrass the guy who already took that seat and go, "Hey, you got to move that seat because my friend's here and he's more wealthier, he's more successful, or he's more accomplished than you," and that would happen. So this was happening in front of Jesus, and to be honest, this also happens in our lives as well. We might not have this arrangement of seat, but in some sense we do. Maybe in our dinner tables, we have a seat for our dad. This is where the mom sits. This is where the kids sit. And so forth and so on. And gatherings in the same place. The titos have their own spots. The titas have their own spots. And the kids, they play outside. They're not welcome on the table. And we have this dynamic play of positions and power at work. And this happening all around us today. And feasts and parties were great ways for people to update each other. And that's how we would assess. They would assess one another, evaluate where their stands are in life. So when you come to a place, a party, a gathering, and you see someone sitting in the seat of honor and be like, "Oh man, that guy must be successful. That guy must be wealthy. And that's just how they would prove themselves in front of other people that this is what was happening in their lives. This is so true to us today, right? We go to a party, we go to a birthday party of your niece or nephew, or you go to an wedding anniversary of your tito or tío or tía, and then you go there, and what do? Well, they ask you questions, right? They always ask you, how are you? How are you, peace? How's it going? Where are you working now? These are questions to assess you. These are questions they are placing where they are placing you in their own seat of honor. What are you doing? Oh, that's a good job. How much do you get paid? Oh man, you're moving up in life, my brother. And so he is mentally placing you in your own in his own seat of honor, and you also become flattered, and you also give yourself a self-promotion. You know, Tito, it's been so long. This is my job now. This is how I get paid. Did you see the car I got? Man, that was so expensive, but the dealer gave me a good deal. I know a friend. You should also talk to my friend. We have all these things that you just brag about and talk because you are also trying to place yourself in his own seat. Does that make sense? So we play this dynamic of, this is what I'm doing in my life, this is how successful I am, this is the people I hang out with all the time, this is my girlfriend, this is what she does, this is where she works, this is what she, all these things. So when we ask each other questions in gatherings, that's pretty much what is taking place. We are literally, well, not literally, but figuratively in the minds of each other, sitting in the places of honor. We are trying to sit in that place. They are also trying to position you in their own mind of, where are you in your life? Am I still better than you? All right? And in your own struggle, you're also trying to prove, yes, I am better than you. But with a nice smile. I'm so proud of you. Come here. I missed you. All that was taking place. And actually, in fact, we don't even need dinner tables anymore. We don't need to be invited to guests to or family parties anymore. We do it constantly now. The idea of by being invited to a party, this party is coming up. This is a great time to tell them of my position and the promotion I got. We don't need to wait for those gatherings anymore because we do it on social media all the time. Post the latest things that we bought, the cars that we own, the houses that we live in, the vacations we go on. These are all projections for people to assess us and saying, this is where I belong in your seat of honor. Look at me. Warren Wiersbe said, in Jesus' day, as today, there were status symbols that help people enhance and protect their high standings in society. If you were invited to the right homes and if you were seated in the right places, then people would know how important you really were. The emphasis was on reputation, not character. It was more important to sit in the right places than to live the right kind of life. And that's our game that we play. We want to be in. We want to be accepted. When the boss says, hey, I have a game, I have golf coming up this weekend, you're in. And you say, yes, I'm in. I'm with the big boys. I'm finally there. And you feel this sense of acceptance and gratification because you are now in the pool of the inner circle. And we constantly do this every time, and we post about it. We post it on Instagram. We share it on TikTok or whatever, and to let people know, hey, everyone, this is now my status. Hey, everyone, this is where I belong in the world. Check me out. And if we are also, and those words that we project, and there's the other side where we receive, and we also assess that person. It's just the game. I don't care. I have those shoes. I have them too. I have that car. I actually got rid of it and got a new one. And we also do that. As they project their image, we also assess them and we value ourselves based on what they present to us, and we also do it at the same time. It is just the Hunger Game of pride and ego. Here, that what allows that to happen and take place in our society and our culture is pride. It's pride that allows us to participate. It's pride, it's our entry to get to enroll in this game of life, this game of comparison, this game of seat of honor all the time. But remember, C.S. Lewis once described pride as the utmost evil. If there's one dangerous sin of all sin, it's really pride. And so Jesus here is speaking and projecting his way of truth, his way of life, as people are just chasing after these temporary things. Jesus, the Son of God, takes notice. Verse 7, how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, and he began to tell them this parable. And that's where we see the heart of Jesus, that he's taking notice of all these things. He's seeing us chase after the temporary things. He's seeing us so obsessed. In his mind, he's wondering, man, what is it that you have a house? Why is it so important that you get approved by these people that you don't even care about? What does it even matter to you? And so he has the heart of God, and he's sharing his truth, his way of living. And his way of living, he shares in a parable, the way of living and the path of humility. That's truly the way of Jesus. That's the way that Jesus lived. And he shares his way, his path, in a form of a parable. Verse 8 says, when someone invites you to a wedding feast, again, so wedding feasts and gatherings are just opportunities to self-promote, self-agendas of saying, this is who I am. Hey, what do you think? Do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, give this person your seat. Then humiliated, you'll have to take the least important place. So Jesus shares a parable of humility. Now, humility, the parable he's sharing is actually from an old proverb in Proverbs chapter 25, verse 6 and following. It says, don't work yourself into the spotlight. Don't push your way into the place of prominence. It's better to be promoted to a place of honor than face humiliation by being demoted. This is an ancient truth, a proverb from the Old Testament that Jesus is now bringing into light once more and even into our hearts today, many years later. And here again, he's in a room full of Pharisees who were experts of the law, who knew the words of God, and yet in their own irony, they knew, but they forgot. So Jesus is sharing this old truth in a form of a parable. That's the brilliance of Jesus. He's not just lecturing, and he's like, don't you remember that verse? He's sharing that same value, that same lesson through the parable. And parables are amazing because parables are not something of an allegory. So if you remember the allegory of the cave, I think it was Plato, if I'm correct. I'm looking at a teacher in this room, the only teacher that I know, and she's giving me the nod of approval. So when you remember allegory of the cave by Plato, you read it, and you have 100 scholars in the room and saying different things. I think this is what it means. I think this is what it represents. I think this is the central theme. And they're all right, and they're all true in some sense. They can play out in different perspectives. But a parable would have a single main point. It's so simple enough that a child can understand to a scholar. So he shares this truth from Proverbs 25 in a form of a parable, telling them, take the seat of humility, take the path of humility. Now, the word humility in itself, even in our world today, even though it has been more accepted than before, it is still a very confusing word. Would you agree? Can you go up, if someone were to ask me, Pastor Peace, what are your strongest traits? I can't go around and tell people I am humble. It just doesn't work. But it's the truth. But can I even say that? That it's truth that I am humble, and tell people around and saying, everyone, I'm such a humble person, aren't I? It just can't happen, even if it's true. You have to let other people, let others know that I'm a humble person. But how can you let people know that you're a humble person until you act humble and try your efforts to be recognized by them approving that you are humble? It's a paradox. You can't do it yourselves, but you can't wait for others, and yet when you can't wait for others, you want to do it yourself. That's the definition of humility as we define it in our culture today. But let's try to understand how Jesus defined humility, how Jesus even exemplified and demonstrated what humility really means. Humility doesn't make sense, and that's the truth. Pastor Peace, I'm trying to get promoted. I'm trying to be recognized in my work, by my family. I'm doing all these things. I'm making an effort. Why are you telling me to take the seat of humility? It just doesn't seem right. It doesn't look attractive. It's not appealing. But Jesus says, trust me. This is the way that you are to live. And as we choose the path of humility, it leads us firstly to contentment. Leads us to a surrendering of the self. Why do we want the seat of honor? Because we want to be accepted. We want to be approved. We want to be appreciated. That's the cry of the human soul since we were born. Why do babies cry? They want to be noticed. Pick me up. Feed me. And when they learn how to speak, they learn how to say, me, mine. And then when they learn how to put words together in a form of sentences, they say, look at me, Daddy, look at me, Daddy, Daddy, look at me, Daddy, look at me. At first they're cute. Oh yes, my child, I look at you, you're the most beautiful thing. But once you grow up, look at me, Daddy, I'm looking. Daddy, are you looking at me? I am looking. You're not looking, I am looking. This is the 8th time you show me that trick. I already seen it. It's the cry of our hearts. It's the human soul. And even as adults, we cry out low-key. Because now we're mature, right? We don't want to be childish. We don't want to look like fools. But yet, we find ways to project that desire to be approved, to be seen, to be accepted. That's why when I post, I look at the likes that I get. And I go, single digits. That post needs to be removed. So I take it down. I wait until it goes triple digits and I go, yes, it's a good post. Why? We want to be accepted. We want people to see us. We want people to recognize us. But at the same time, because we're humble, it's okay. Isn't that such a paradox? And that is not humility that Jesus wanted us to demonstrate. The true way of humility is contentment. I am content. I am satisfied. I am complete. A lot of times when we show when we choose for ourselves the seat of honor in the eyes of others, or even in our own desire to be seated, a lot of times we don't necessarily pick that place of honor because of how much we have. We sometimes really think about this. We project ourselves to be in control, wealthy, successful because of what we lack. Because of what we lack, we initiate the seat of honor. Because of what we do not have, we magnify the small thing that we do have and make that an impressive thing. We rent a Ferrari and we make a big deal out of it because we know we will never afford it. We go on one vacation and we just spread it around and let the world know this is my life. We do that with family members. We do that with children. We do that with our lifestyle. We constantly just in a place of dissatisfaction because our contentment is temporary. And whenever that temporary contentment expires, we look for new ways to be content and new ways for people to approve. And we are constantly updating, constantly changing our status, constantly at work to keep our reputation intact. And so the truth is sometimes we hide our shame. We hide what we lack in the face of honor. But true contentment, we find ourselves in Philippians chapter 4, where Paul describes this is contentment. He says, I'm not saying this because I feel neglected, for I've learned to be satisfied with what I have. I know what it is to be in need and what it is to have more than enough. I have learned the secret so that anywhere, at any time, I am content. Whether I am full or hungry, whether I have too much or too little. And verse 13 really summarizes it for us. I have the strength to face all conditions by the power that Christ gives me. When we say I am content, we mistake it as I'm just settling. I guess this is just as far as I go. I'll just accept this reality. God's will. If this is God's will, then I will just be content. I'll take the 50%. I'll take the lowest position. That is not contentment. Paul was not saying, oh, well, this is my life now that I'm a Christian. No, he was saying, I can do all things because I just accept it. No, he says, I accept all things because of the power of Christ in me. I am complete in Christ. That's really what he's saying. When I am in Jesus, I don't need things to be filled in my life. When I find Jesus, I don't find anything lacking. Therefore, I am satisfied to the full. So here's a contentment checklist that we ourselves can go through. Number one is, I am content, even if no one recognizes me. Go through it. In your office, in your family, in your careers, wherever you are. Do you find yourself content if no one recognizes me? Again, it's not just saying, oh, well, that's society, that's just my workplace. No, you're saying, Jesus has already filled me, therefore I don't need to go looking for other people to fill me up. Jesus has already completed me, that's why I don't need the acknowledgement of my boss to say good job or well done or whatnot. Second, I am content, even if I'm not acknowledged for my works. Say you're in a group project. You do all the work. You send it to the one guy doing all the presentation. The teacher says, good job. Those are some well-done research for the job, for your career, whatnot. And the guy just says, thank you. This was all me. And you're sitting by their side and you go, huh? How dare he? But you're content. I am content even if people are not showing me appreciation. In your family, in your homes, fathers, mothers. They don't say thank you. They don't say please. And you go, ah! But you're content. Because your approval is not in your family. Your approval does not come from your children. Your approval comes from the strength that is given, for strength that you can face in all conditions by the power of Christ. We are saying, I am complete. That's true contentment. Gavin Ortlund says, many in our society struggle with the sense of shame, inferiority, and low self-worth. We must sharply distinguish such feelings from the goal of humility. Whatever else humility will require of you, it will never rob you of your dignity as an image bearer of God. Humble people don't need constant attention, but they also don't necessarily mind being noticed. Humble people don't need flattery, but they can sincerely receive a compliment. Such people are not constantly minimizing themselves. They can walk into a room with a bounce in their step, open to what their presence might contribute to others, but not needing it to. Because again, they're content. They have surrendered themselves. It is no longer just I. It is Christ that is in me. And when I am living in Christ, I find myself satisfied. The second path that it leads us to is compassion, and it's very connected. When we're filled with ourselves, we don't find ourselves having compassion. When we choose when we intentionally take the seat of honor, we're saying, I am more important. I come first. My family, my worth, my values are the final say. And we don't find ourselves having compassion. And when there's no compassion, there's a lack of service for others and to others. What I mean by that is, there was a time where my mom wanted to prepare lunch for our pastors and a few of our staff here at PV. And so all night she prepared, actually all weekend, if I'm not mistaken. She prepared all weekend. She boiled soup for 48 hours so our pastors and our staff can enjoy a nice meal. And so I think it was a Tuesday, one of those days. She lives in Palmdale, so I was with her, and we drove that out together. And we drove. So Palmdale, if you don't know, is about an hour away. It is quite a distance. So we drove out here to Pinnacle Village for an hour. She was unloading all these things, and she noticed, I forgot one bag of food. Like, she packed it in these coolers, and she goes, I forgot it at home. And I just responded, and? Don't say it. What are you trying to say? Like, she didn't even ask me at that point to do something. She just said, I forgot something at home. What do you want me to do? That was my natural response. And then she had to spell it out. She says, I need you to go back. Excuse me? We just drove an hour to get here, and you're telling me to drive back another hour and drive back here for another hour. And I was furious because I had plans. While my mom was, treating our guests, I had things to do. I was going to go do my own things. I had my own schedule. I had it all in my mind and planned out, and it was going to be a perfect day. And here she comes, ruining it because of that one thing she forgot. And she's telling me to go be responsible. And I thought, this is outrageous. But I did it. I had to. I had no choice. You know what I mean? Like, you have a choice, but you have no choice because it's your mom. So I'm driving back. I'm furious. It's the longest drive back home. All these things, what I do for her, what I've done, all I've sacrificed. I go home. I break through the door. I don't even open it with my keys. Where's the bag? Look for the bag. I pick it up, throw it in the back of the car, slam the door, I'm off to PV. Another hour back. And all throughout, I'm trying to assess what's happening to me. Why am I so upset? I was furious. I was infuriated. This is my time. God, why are you doing this to me? What's the lesson to be learned? And I'm just going through my mind. I love my mom. Of course. I love her. I love all that she's done. I appreciate her so much. I can't live without her. Do I not love our pastors and our staff? I love them, of course. Of course I love them. Of course I want to serve them. But here's my conclusion. I love myself more. I love them, but I am still more important than them. I come first. I am a priority in my own life, and no one should ever say so. That's the problem of pride. And even in my act of service, of driving, sacrificing 2 hours, again, of my time, gas is $5 a gallon, ladies and gentlemen, to Palmdale. My time, my energy, my wealth, my everything in the act of that sacrificing service, it was still about me. And if we cannot choose the path of humility, even in our service for our loved ones, our friends, our family, whoever, it's about you. and there's no compassion at all. Pride makes us compare, and humility fills us with compassion. Pride will always put yourself first. It will compete with others for their reputation versus my reputation. I will compare with you no matter what. Because you know what was even more crazy? What was more insane, what was more wild was this. As I was driving back, this was also my conclusion because pride was still taking a seat in my heart. I said, this is going to look good in front of our pastors. That's pride. They're going to see how obedient son I am. They're going to see how sacrificing I am. They're going to see I'm such a good son and a good pastor. It's okay. It's a L, but it's a win at the same time. So let's take a lose-win day. Okay? But let me tell you, I did not enjoy that meal. Because I was filled with pride. Because even in that service for others, I was thinking about myself. And I was comparing. Would other pastors do this? Would other people do this for their mothers and their pastors? No, it is I. And I was just so full of myself that I could not serve. That even in my service, the disguise of service, it was still about me. Still in my act of obedience, it was about me. My act of sacrifice, and even in the disguise of humility. Wow, Pastor P is such a humble guy. You can fool others, but you can never fool God. And you can never fool yourself if you're really honest and can't deny, no. At the end of the day, at the end of that service, it was still all about me. I did it because I want my reputation to be boosted. I did it because I want my acknowledgement. I did it because I wanted my approval, a stamp of approval in the eyes of others. I wanted to do it because it was all about me. Paul says in Philippians 2, whatever you do, don't let selfishness or pride be your guide. Be humble. What does that mean? It means and honor others more than yourself. When we choose humility, that means you're honoring others. You're putting others first. You're valuing family. You're sacrificing, but it's not about what I can get in return. You're serving, but it's not about what can I do and what can I get in exchange. It's fully submission because you are content. Remember, you're not trying to fill your gap and your void even through service. You are already coming from a place of completeness and satisfaction. That's where we serve. So when we even fail at serving, we're okay when people disagree and people disapprove of our service because we didn't do it for them. I didn't do this to be approved by you. I did it because out of the abundance of the love of Jesus flowing in my life, and He commands me to serve, and I serve. And if I failed you, then the truth is, it's not me that failed, it's you who failed to see the service and the love that was flowing out of my life. But a lot of times, even when we fail, we don't ever want to do that again because it's about me. I don't ever want to be embarrassed. I never want to be corrected. I never want to be criticized again for what I did. I was doing in obedience, and look where it led me. It's still about the self. It's still about me. But when we're content people and we're humble people, we can be compassionate. Even if you fail, you are also willing to say, how can I do better? How can I be more? How can I keep improving myself? And that was the way of Jesus. The humility that Jesus demonstrated did not rise from lack of self-esteem, lack of love, power, or ability. His humility came from the fact that He knew who He was, where He came from, where He was going, and whose He was. That is the true definition of contentment. I know who I am. I know where I come from. I know where I'm going. I know whose I am. That permitted Him to treat people with love and respect. Humility is realizing and emphasizing the importance of others. It is not putting yourself down. It is lifting others up. It is saying to yourself and others, I am precious in God's sight, and so are you. When you see someone better than you, you're not intimidated. You ever feel that? That's also false humility. When you see someone better than you, you kind of shrink away, and you're forced to be humble. That is not it. Even if you see someone more esteemed, more prestigious, more wealthier, you're not basing your value off of them. You don't care about the seat you have in his heart or what he thinks of you. You don't care about your position where you don't even care about where he is placed in your life. You're content. I am complete in Christ. I can do all things. I know what it is to have full. I know what it is to have nothing. I am not seeking approval. So the question is, when we are truly, when we're truly compassionate and we find ourselves serving others, are you becoming your full self, or are you just full of yourself? That's the choice we make. Do we find our path of humility allowing us to be the full version of ourselves? When you're fully content, you can give anything you want. You don't have to hold back. When you're content in Jesus' eyes, and when you're satisfied with the power that God bestows in you, you don't have to hold back. You're like, oh, what about me? You can give fully, and you can realize, I didn't know I was capable of compassion such as deep as this. I didn't know I was aware of such love. I didn't know I could be so gracious. But when we're filled with pride, it's the other way. We just become full of ourselves. One man I want to share with us today is the former president, 16th president, way back down the road of history, is Abraham Lincoln. When we think of presidents today, the word humility doesn't really come into place. When we think about people in power and position, humility is not in their vocabulary. And perhaps because of the culture that we live in today, that's why even we think, in order for me to climb up, I can't be humble. I have to be charismatic. I have to have this, let people know I'm confident. But again, contentment does not come from what is approved by others. It is what God approves of you. And this man was such a humble man. In fact, in times of civil war, it's actually the most bloodiest war in American history. In the time of division amongst families, brothers versus brothers, one would say, I will fight for the Union, I'll fight for the South, I'll fight for these rights, for these truths, for these ways of living as an American. Slavery was one of those things that divided the country, but there was so much more that took place, and he was a man in that position, elected as leader, to keep the country together in one piece. He had absolute no administrative experience, only 1 year of formal schooling. Newspapers described him as third-rate Western lawyer and a fourth-rate lecturer. His main rivals were Republican nominations were William Henry Seward, celebrated senator from New York, who had been two-term governor of his state, Salmon P. Chase from Ohio, who had been a senator and a governor of his state, and much respected, long-serving former Congressman Edward Bates. Abraham Lincoln was just a third-rate lawyer, had no experience. And yet, despite this, he beat them to the nomination and then won the election. Much to everyone's amazement at the time, instead of consigning his opponents to oblivion, he appointed them all to his cabinet. He recognized their great gifts, and even though newspapers at the time cited this as evidence of his total political naive, Lincoln's logic for doing so was simple. And I quote, I had looked the party over, concluded that these were the very strongest men, then I had no right to deprive the country of their service. He became his full self, not full of himself. I won in your face. He became his full self. When we become our full self, we find rooms for compassion. We think of others. It's less of me. It's not reduction of me. It's less of my ego, more of them. And what was the secret to this man? Ultimately, the path of humility leads us to the path of the cross and our submission to God. Imagine a higher position than the President of the United States. We really can't think of any. But he was a man that still yielded and submitted to an authority beyond him. We, in our own position, already feel this is the top of the world. I don't need to respond. I don't need to answer to anyone. I am the captain of my fate. I create my own destiny. I am the master of my own future. So no one has say in what I do and what I say, pretty much. But ultimately, submission is the cross. That's the ultimate demonstration of Jesus' life, that even in his walk on earth, that he submitted to his Father in heaven and submitted himself to God. President Lincoln did the same thing. The power that he had, understanding that no matter where I am placed in the eyes of the world, there's a higher authority than me. There's a greater divine beyond me. And only to him I yield and I submit. He's been found that many times, the toughest seasons and the darkest times of the nation, that people would find him kneeling in his room, praying and reading his Bible. He says, I have been driven many times upon my knees by the overwhelming conviction that I have nowhere else to go. My own wisdom and that of all about me seemed inefficient for that day. When we end up facing giants in our lives, there are moments where we just say, I can't do this. Seems like I can't. But our pride won't let us admit to that. Our ego will not allow us to submit and yield. God, to you, I give I give you my allegiance. Because submission is not a word that we like. We like being in control. We like having power. We like having things the way we planned and organized. But eventually, there will be a day where God will really test and see who is the final say in your life. There's a few weeks back, our young adults, our Hiraya group, went on a trip to Lake Tahoe. So if you're looking for a vacation spot, I highly recommend Lake Tahoe. We have those who have joined us are young ladies as well. And it was an amazing time. It was really awesome. It was my first time in Lake Tahoe. I was like, wow, this is here. And I've never been, and I never visited all these years. And when you go to Lake Tahoe, there's one activity you must do. And that is White River rafting. Highly recommended. And you cannot come back from Tahoe without doing White River rafting, ladies and gentlemen. I give my word. Okay, at first, so this is how you have to know the little background of how this all took place. So one of our pastors, I won't say who, said, we should go to Lake Tahoe and do rafting. And that person made it sound like it's really fun. You're going to go to the river, you're going to pull up at the stream, you're going to swim, you can do a picnic, you can spend the whole time just at the river and just enjoy a relaxing day. And all the young adults were like 20 and up. We have aching joints and pains, and that sounded really good. And it's like, all right, let's do it. All 15 of us, all 15 signed up and said, let's go rafting. But then our destiny just took shape and turned the other way when we got on the bus of the rafting company, and our guide, one of our guides, is a 6'5" giant of a football player, former collegiate athlete, comes up and says, long story, just the bottom line, he says, you can die, okay? That's the gist of his orientation. It's like, all right, guys, you're rafting today. This is gonna be fun, but you can die. Okay, I'm not kidding you. He said you can die every time. Every illustration he gave about safety, he said you can die. Like, if you don't put on this life jacket, you can die. If you don't put on this helmet correctly, you can die. And everyone on the bus was freaking out. We're like, this is not what we signed up for. This is not picnic at the river. This is far from it. So we're freaking out. And even that pastor that recommended is also freaking out. It's like, what have I done? So we're all just kind of collecting ourselves. We're there anyway, so we're just putting on our gear. We're like white-faced, and we're terrified. We're like, oh my goodness. One of us is not going to make it back. Some of us will not go home. Me as a pastor, leading this is already thinking, man, I have to write letters to parents. What am I going to say to my elders, to our elders and our senior pastors? Like, all these thoughts running through our mind. But it was an amazing experience. Please do it. Please go rafting. Why is that? I realized it kind of gave me a perspective of life. When we choose to go on this path, let's say, of humility, one thing that the guide advised us is, if you want to have a good time, if you want to live, he said this one thing: listen to your guides. That's all he said. You don't have to be awesome at paddling. You don't have to be awesome at swimming. You don't have to be a Superman knowing everything about rafting. He said, just listen to your guide. I find myself a little confident when it comes to physical activities. So even in my position, I just thought, I can do this. But when the rafting was going like this, I was like, help me, guide, tell me what to do. You have to listen. You have to fully trust. And that's what submission is all about. You submit to something we trust. Why don't we like to submit? Because we don't trust it. I trust my judgment at the end of the day more than anything else. That's why we don't want to submit. So but in this case, we had to trust. Our life was literally in the hands of our guides. When he says forward, we have to paddle forward. When he says paddle backwards, we have to paddle backwards. When he says we're going to spin, the raft is going to spin. Doesn't matter, because the course was getting rough and rough and rough. And all the more, it didn't matter if you're the president of the United States. It didn't matter if you're the CEO of Fortune 500. It didn't matter at that time if you owned 3 Ferraris and a Lamborghini parked in your garage. It didn't matter if you owned 4 real estates all across the country or the world. What mattered was, who will you listen to? Will you submit, or will you let the ego play out? I can still do this. I'm still a strong guy. I'm still capable. I'm still worthy. Will you still function in your own ways? That is the final destination of our path of humility, the cross. Will you submit? Will you yield? Will you trust the guide of the instructor, or the guide of the guide? That's why they were there. They were brilliant, by the way. We had this one tiny lady. She was steering the course of all of us. And that's how I realized, that's really God, isn't it? If we would simply trust Him, He's the one that is steering everything. We just did one forward and relax. Enjoy the view. One back, relax, enjoy the view. But when I look at the guide, she's the one trying to go left, trying to go right, trying not to hit the rocks. When she says, embrace yourself, you embrace yourself. If you don't, no, I don't want to embrace. You don't know who I am. You'll fall out. But it's a full submission. I trust you. And our guide, our Father in heaven, He is our good shepherd. He's the best shepherd. And only in Him can we know our true self. Only in Him can we pour out our shame? This is actually what I'm embarrassed about. This is what I'm really trying to hide when I project these things. Only in Him can we be truly honest. And only in Him, He says, I'll take that and I'll use it for your glory, for my glory. I'll take your humble posture and I'll exalt you. 1 Peter 5 says, humble yourselves therefore under the mighty hand of God. It is a mighty hand. Humble yourself under the mighty hand of the guide. He's actually doing everything for you. He's the one that is steering the raft. You're just there. You just need to listen. You just need to yield. You just need to be obedient. You just need to submit, trust. I don't know how this is going to end, but just trust, listen, submit. Humble yourselves before the mighty hand of God. Remove that pride. Remove that ego. Take away your expectation. Remove and strip away all the things you desire from the world to be appreciated, approved, and seen. Submit yourself to the under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time He may exalt you. At the proper time He may exalt you. And this is God. When we have a hard time submitting to Him because we're afraid, He says, cast your anxieties on Him because He cares for you. So God, I can't yield. I just can't help it. And I want to trust you. I want to submit to you, but I'm so anxious, but still the words, the voices of the world is still there. He says, and then cast your anxieties on Him. In that moment, cast your insecurities on Him. Cast your doubts on Him. He cares for you. But if you yield, if you submit, if you humble yourselves at the proper time, He will exalt you. Andrew Murray on humility says, don't seek or ask for honor. That's God's responsibility. See to it that you humble yourself and take no place before God or man except that of a servant. Your responsibility is humble service. Let that also be your one goal and prayer. God is faithful. Just as water always runs to the lowest place, so the moment God finds people humble and empty, His glory and power will flow into them to lift them up and bless them. Humble yourselves, that's your part. Honoring us, that's God's part. By His mighty power and great love, He will do it. If there's one thing we want to notice, again, I just want to bring our attention to the parable, just ending with that parable. No matter what seat you choose, did you notice you can never take the seat of the host? You can choose the seat of honor, and you can humble yourself and choose the seat of humility. But you can never come and find yourself to sit at the seat of the host, because the host will always be God. You can never take that place. And that's our mistake. That's where we get it wrong. We think we are the hosts of our own lives, telling people where they should sit in our own thoughts, in our own hearts. We think we're the hosts telling people where they should be placed in my own perspective of life and success, and the ladder of success. But the reality and the truth that Jesus brings about is that there is a host. It is the host that takes you out or places you in. It is the host that will exalt you, or it's the host that will humble you. Trust the host. Submit yourself to the host. Pick up your cross, as Jesus would say, follow me daily. Deny yourself and follow me daily. Our action step is every day, every moment. You feel pride pricking. You feel your ego inflamed. Say this simple prayer: Jesus, take your place. Host, take your place. Sit in the center of my heart, the table of my heart. Put me where I belong. Allow me to be humbled and be exalted. Allow me to learn the lesson of humility as you teach me your ways. Jesus, take your place. Can I invite you to stand at this time? Let's come before our God. Can we do that today as well? Pride is such an ongoing battle we face every moment, every instant, every choice, every reaction. There's pride involved. But we look into the life of Jesus, the path that He shows us, the path of humility. Ultimately, it is also our decision to say, Jesus, take your place. Can you imagine the most powerful being of the universe, the creators of the heavens and earth? What is stopping Him? What is stopping God moving in your life? That one answer is pride. It's pride that is blocking God's way in your life. So let's come before our God. Let's respond. Let's pray. Let's pray that prayer. Jesus, take your place.
Help me to live this life as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to you. Help me to live this life as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to you. Make my worship pure, make my love endure, melt away my pride, Lord, renew my mind. Help me to live for you only, to reflect your glory, to be as one called by my God, that you be seen as beauty by the life you live through me, be glorified. Oh God, help me to live for you only, to reflect your glory, to be as one called by my God, that you be seen as beauty by the life you live through me, be glorified. Oh God, help me to live. Help me to live. Help me to live for you only, to reflect your glory, to be as one called by my God, that you be seen as beauty by the life you live through me, be glorified. Oh God, help me to live for you only, to reflect your glory, to be as one called by my God, that you be seen as beauty
Let's all come before our God at this time in time of response and prayer. Let's end this time just once again proclaiming, Jesus, take your place. Father, we pray that you may take your place in our hearts, in the center of our table. Become the host, O God, that sees me for who I am. That I no longer have to chase after the things of the world, the materials, the possessions, the reputations, the acknowledgments from anywhere else, but to find my true contentment, find peace in you. Father, knowing that in you, it's not because I'm settling less, I'm learning to let go, but in you, I find completeness. I find myself whole, intact, filled with life, because it's no longer defined by what others say, or even what I say, but it's defined by my life in you. Father, and as we do that we may learn to be compassionate, Lord, to one another, to my spouse, to let ego die, let pride die, and to truly love one another from the depth of the love that you pour into our hearts. To be of service to your kingdom, to our work, to my community, to those all around me. Because it's not about me anymore. It's about you working in me. It is you working through me. It is you working with me. And finally, oh Lord, for those who are just hesitant to submit, maybe it's out of fear. Perhaps it's out of just worry and anxiety. What will happen if I submit to you? What will I do with all this control in my life that I need if I just yield to you? Father, I pray that you may just bring peace, you bring comfort, you bring clarity, you bring hope and light, oh God, as we take the boldness to say yes to you and say, Jesus, take your place. Father, we thank you for Pinnacle Village, all the work of the ministry and all that you've established here. We thank you for just the 2 services we have once again, knowing that it is not because we've worked our way, Lord, it's simply through the grace and the love you provide for us as a community each and every single day. Father, and as we just go and live throughout our weeks, be with us in our work, be with us with our family, our loved ones, that again you take your seat in our hearts. Father, everything that we do today, as we offer to you our tithes and our offering, Lord, we give with grateful hearts. We give with humble hearts, knowing that all these things come from you anyways. And we simply give you back the glory and the honor that you deserve. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.